David Lidz. David, welcome into the conversation. Really glad to have you today.
Really great to be here, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Enlighten our listeners a little bit about yourself. We talk a lot on this show about things like social enterprise, around using business for good to do, positive community development. And those words all sort of became popular in the last, 10-ish, maybe 15 years or so. But it sounds like this idea of doing good with business wasn't something you read in a book or heard in a TED talk or like heard a buzzword somewhere. It was something you've been doing just for a long time.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I'll give you the 5-minute bio that explains how I stumbled into social enterprise. Um, and it starts with me having a government relations career in the 90s, both in Annapolis at the state level and in Washington, D.C. at the congressional level. Um, and also having a severe drinking problem. And I'm an alcoholic. I drank my career and everything else that was dear to me away. Um, and I ended up, sinking to a pretty low bottom. So sleeping in the woods, smelling bad, scuffling with police, that kind of stuff. Um, July of 2002, my dad threw me into a rehab where I got it. Like I got really impassioned about the idea of spiritual recovery. Um, and uh, and what I learned in there is that in order to stay sober, I have to stay close to my community, in that case, the sobriety community, and also to help other alcoholics and addicts who are trying to rise up from this abyss. So I got out of rehab after just 15 short days, fired up about that calling or that new path I was on, I might say. But I also found out that nobody wanted to employ me because of my recent past. Capitol Hill wasn't taking me back. Home Depot wouldn't even hire me. So I was kind of like hanging around the streets of West Baltimore, going to my in between my halfway house and um, meetings. And I found some cats that were working on foreclosed vacant properties. They were cutting the grass and cleaning them out, tarping leaking roofs, changing the locks. And I got to talking to them, and they didn't care about my about my recent past. I got work, cutting grass and changing locks and trashing out properties. And long before I had ever heard the term social enterprise, what I had stumbled my way into, quite literally, is what I now that I know the lexicon, I call a low barrier employment opportunity. No check the box, uh, no training needed. I could come in and start cutting the grass and learn my way up from there. And what I had stumbled into was a an opportunity. We were hired as 1099 contractors, and we could build our little businesses, in whatever direction and as big as we wanted to. So I stuck with it. It started to grow, the little contracting company. As it grew, I did what I was hearing in these recovery rooms, which is to help others that are trying to follow the path that I'm now on. So I hired people coming back from rehab and people coming back from jail. Again, not because I had ever heard the word social enterprise, but this is what I was doing to stay sober myself and to stay, grounded. Um, that model kind of just grew over the years. I got some licenses. I got my real estate license. I got my general contracting license. I started to get my real estate chops, so to speak. Started talking to investors and doing some property management, which led to us opening up some sober houses, some recovery residences. And still, long before I'd heard anything about any of these terms like employment, social enterprise, or housing first models, we had all of that. We had a model where folks could come back from rehab or jail, get a bed in one of our sober houses, and get stabilized and start getting engaged in peer recovery programming, recovery programming. And once they were stabilized and had some footing, they could come over to the construction company and stay with us temporarily to kind of get back on their way or grow with us, advance their skills and grow with us as we turned in at this point to a full scale renovation company. This kind of arcs to where we're at today when in the deepest troughs of the Great Recession, again, we are a company that specializes in managing, maintaining, and renovating foreclosure stock for pretty much national lenders or government institutions like Fannie Mae or FHA or Freddie Mac. And we are finding more and more that these institutions are sending us into really poor urban neighborhoods throughout the Maryland, DC region. And unlike the rich neighborhoods that they send us to, which would be like Montgomery County, Maryland, or Potomac, Maryland, when they send us there, like they send us to do a full renovation, get the property ready to go back on the market. So, that community can enjoy some form of recovery. But when they send us to Baltimore or to historically redlined blocks of Hagerstown, Maryland, or to Prince George's County, which is a majority black county in Maryland that was just decimated by the foreclosure, by the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
They're just sending us there to board up and to abandon these assets. And at the same time, like they don't give a crap about our social mission. They don't pay us well. They don't want to help us with our sobriety programming. So we come up with a thesis, which is, hey, man, why don't we become our own developer? Why don't we see if we can raise some money and start buying some of these assets, focus investment of our own in what we are now understanding historically redlined and historically oppressed Baltimore neighborhoods. And if we can do that, if we can raise some impact investment, by now we are kind of in on the lingo, with some catalytic terms, some concessionary terms, some impactful terms, we could raise a neighborhood that's been just historically abandoned and trashed for generations by our financial institutions. We could create better pay and better supports for ourselves. Once we finish these severely distressed homes that we're renovating, we could rent them out and create a form of affordable housing. And we're doing all this in a shared equity or a cooperative kind of model, which we call an impact real estate portfolio. We can distribute the equity of everything we've built to the workers that did the work and to the tenants that moved in, and then to other neighborhood stakeholders. Began pitching this around 2018, 17 or so. By 2019, we get a funder, that's Seed Commons. I mean, we'll talk maybe a little bit later about what that looked like, but the short of it for now is they funded our conversion from this construction company that I had begun called Appalachian Field Services. They funded the conversion of that from me being the sole owner into an employee-owned co-op. And then they advanced their funding as they got to know us better to support this IREP model. And by now they have issued a $5 million line of credit for us. And we are up to 22 properties, 30 workers, and we can get in maybe a little later. It's probably time for me to shut up here, but about all the impact that
Oh
that
yeah.
financing and this model has driven.
Well, and it sounds like, because there's a bunch of stuff I'd love to follow up with you on, and we'll follow up here. But also, this is going to be a two-part conversation where we're going to get to dig a little deeper. You mentioned, I used to be in homeless case management, and so there's a lot of stuff I'd love to talk to you about housing first and all that. But to kind of stay on topic, I was thinking about what you said when you were talking about the difference between the way that the companies have you approach the one neighborhood from the other, the redlined neighborhood that hasn't had the same access to resources, has actually been divested in. We were talking about divestment earlier. That's actually been divested
Mm-hmm.
in from Wall Street and private equity, versus these other neighborhoods that are being invested into. And it seems like there's just a fundamental mindset difference between the way you and your group are thinking about doing real estate investment or doing business development investment, and the way that some of those other groups might be doing that. And I think that might kind of get a little bit to the more holistic approach that you and I have talked about that you take in your business, where yes, profit is important. Profit is a thing that must be had in order for a business to stay in business, but that there's more to it than that. in the long run. A lot of people, when it comes to business, would just say, well, just maximize profit. And that's kind of the only thing that really, at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, that really is going to matter. I guess, how has that mindset, um, how has that mindset set up the work that you're doing now?
Oh, it's so exciting. So for years this was just theoretical, but now we're like really in it. And so I can give you some great examples. So yes, we are a for-profit cooperative. So we don't get anything in the way of grants, really. Couple little
Hmm.
nickels and dimes here and there, but um, we use a loan to go out and purchase and renovate these properties, a loan that we then have to pay back. Again, the rates are very good that we've got. I hope we talk about that later. But to your point, um, little rocky at the beginning because we emerged into this idea as kind of a startup. So we're like figuring out our way, and then COVID happens. But now we're at the point in the last 18 months or so where we are emerging into profitability and into, beyond break even and into profitability and into towards a positive balance sheet. And so some of the things that we're experiencing in this community equity model, which is what it is we are highly focused on providing good wages and good benefits for our workers, which was a thing we could not do when we worked for these corporations and for the like contracting with the federal government with these supposedly white hat agencies, like FHA and Freddie Mae. We could not pay so our wage range prior to 2019 when we converted to co-op was $11 an hour to $17 an hour. And at the time, we've always stayed like $2 ahead of minimum wage. I think minimum wage was somewhere around 9 or 10. Anyway, 11 to 17. And then since we've converted and really gotten our proof of concept to prove out, our wages have not, we have taken this thing that you might otherwise call profit and we've invested in our own workers. We've, let our own workers own the fruits of their labor. And our wage range has shifted from 17 to $48 an hour, I think, in like 3 years' time. Um, and again, we're about to, which is just, by the way, is amazing. And we have some benefits now, and we're able to train much better and run safer and cleaner work sites, and we're able to invest in the surroundings. So outside of our property, any property we might own, there might be abandoned vacant lots that are full of trash and rats and lead and all that. And we can spend a little money on investing and just cleaning up our more, a community look at how we own an asset, right? Um, we are now looking at popping into a positive balance sheet probably in 2025, maybe 2026. And now we'll have this real conversation where at the end of the year we'll say, hey, we have these profits. Do we want to distribute dividends to our workers and tenants? And we have a growing value in our balance sheet. How do we want to talk about and distribute that equity to our cooperative members in the form of like long-term wealth building? And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. Like the way when it's when you're not focused on just like extraction and pulling everything you can out, to, I don't know, become uber rich. And, when you're not solely focused on profit, but instead you think of reinvestment and thinking of lifting up your peers and yourself, I just think it's a way more creative and way more powerful way to run an economy. And I think we have a great like little petri dish showing that
Hmm.
there's truth to this, man.
Yeah, and that's why we wanted to. That's why I wanted to have you on, was to show those examples. Paul Saginaw, who started Zingerman's up in Michigan, they're now one of the biggest food distribution and restaurant kind of worker-owned co-ops up there. Told me once that it's amazing what you can accomplish in business when your main goal isn't to make money. You'll make money, but like when your main goal is to do something else, and that's what I see you doing. And I'm really looking forward to digging in part two with you here on more specifically on how you let those values evolve from where you're starting a business with a mission to where you're actually making it a community asset, to where you're actually making that business an asset for the community, not just an asset for your own, your own portfolio. So really excited to dig in with you on that. Remember, you can listen to us now on all of the Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Stitcher, all of the places you get your podcasts. Obviously, listen to us live here on Biz Radio US on Tuesdays. And check us out on YouTube now. We are up on video on YouTube, so subscribe there as well. And until next time, tune in next week to listen to the rest of the conversation with David Lidz. And until then, remember, we are each other.